Good morning. Nice to see you all in our workshop for today. My name is Birgit Michels. I'm working at DAAD at GAY Germany. Our workshop today is about student journey mapping. This is a tool that enables you to look at your offers and services through the eyes of your students and gain unique insights into the perspective of your target groups. It helps you to understand their needs and challenges and shows points of interaction and communication gaps. Today we will focus on incoming students. I'm very happy to welcome Kirk Doyle and Boudewijn Grievink. Kirk comes from the Australian Catholic University and joins us from Sydney, and Boudewijn is joining us from Utrecht in the Netherlands. I'm very happy to welcome you both today, and I'm now handing over to you.
Well, the workshop we're going to do with you today and the tool we're going to share with you is something, well, both Kirk and I use quite a bit in our work at our universities. And we're looking forward to, to share our experience with you. And we hope you find the tool as useful as we did in our work. To go over the content, what we'll do today, we basically have two goals today. One is to make you all familiar and give you a first taste with the tool Student Journey Map and how you can use this tool to improve services to your students. And we're focusing on students today, but this is also a tool that you can use for different groups as well. So you can also keep in the back of your mind if you're also working on staff exchange, for instance. It's also a tool that you can use for these groups, but in order to focus a little, we decided to focus on students today. So that's the one goal, trying to familiarize you with the tool. And the second goal is, to have an interactive discussion with you, so you can also inspire each other in how to improve the process for inbound students into your university. First of all, before we go into the case, I'd like to introduce you a little bit about the theory about student journey mapping. And actually it's a tool that has been developed by Microsoft years back. When I think it was around 2000, they realized that they had some great programmers while working on tools like Word, for instance. But when they were talking to users of MS Word, it basically turned out that about 90% of the functionalities in the program were very hard to find, and no one actually knew where to look for it. So that's when they decided at Microsoft, okay, we need to take a different perspective at the way we develop these programs, and maybe put the user first and start from that point. And by doing so, they've adjusted Word and made it more user-friendly, and also made sure that the services and the functionalities were there in the program were actually used as well. And that's exactly what we're actually trying to do with the student journey mapping. So clearly the student is not a computer program, but if you look at universities, they are quite often large organizations who have created these procedures that are quite hard to adapt. And if I'm speaking from my own experience at Radboud University, we also had this feeling like, okay, actually we know what's best for the students, and we've set these procedures and we've done so for many, many years, so why change? But I think, for all of you, if you look at the student population, it's actually changing, and also the way students are getting used to, communicating with organizations, whether it's like companies or institutions. Changes are going on, and it's important to adapt to that as a large organization, but where to start and how to do this. And to give you an example, at Radboud University, we used to send out a booklet with information for international students to, all international students. But this was actually a booklet with all the information about the entire process of coming to the Netherlands. So this was a booklet of over 70 pages, and which was aimed at incoming PhDs, incoming international students, incoming staff, incoming visiting staff for short periods of time. So there was a lot of information. And actually, no one read the booklet. There were a lot of questions about, how processes were going. So when we started talking to students, like, okay, what would you actually prefer? They were saying, other organizations have like these apps, or making sure that information is coming more timely. So what we did is develop this app for international students, and they could just receive the information they would need for the phase that they were in. So we timed the information better, and we also made sure that they didn't get the information that was actually for staff members, for instance. So by doing so, we noticed that the use of the information went up, and also that the appreciation of students about, well, the information they got in the process was a lot better. We did so by using a student map. So we put the student central, and we basically start mapping, okay, well, what is it, what you're going to do if you want to come to our university. So we started this user perspective, and we basically put all departments that were working for this international student together in a room to discuss this process, because in organizations, people tend to have this tendency to think from an organizational perspective, saying, well, my department is doing this, which is just a limited part of the process, and just focus on that. Whereas the student journey map actually allows to look at the entire process, and then maybe you find out that the way things are organized could be, well, way more efficient or user-friendly by doing it in a different way. But then you need to talk to the different departments and to the user. And another reason why to use the student journey map is that it's quite easy to identify low-hanging fruit. And I hope you will experience so later on during the exercise, that you don't always need like a big scheme or a strategic plan to start improving services to your students. And the student journey map is actually a way of identifying these opportunities. And the fifth reason why I personally like using the student journey map is that within universities, I think we all know that there can be like some kind of, politics going on, people working different departments, and that there's some resistance to change. A lot of people don't like to change because it's interfering with their work. But what most people in universities have in common, or I would say actually all people in universities have in common, is that they are very motivated to offer the best services to staff and students. So if you put those students first, it's also a way of overcoming the resistance that you would have when you usually have discussions between different departments. So then the question is how to actually do this student journey mapping. And we're basically taking a demand-driven approach, identifying the various touch points, as we call them, which the student is taking as steps in the process they have to go through. And it's an inclusive approach. So if you're using this tool, I would recommend to invite all the departments that are working on this process, but also include students, because, they know what's best. And to give you an example, yesterday I also gave this example for the outbound students that we thought, okay, we find this internationalization very important, so we will ask our rector to write a letter to the students emphasizing how important internationalization is. And when we started talking to the students about, okay, did you receive this letter? What do you think about it? The first response was like, who is a rector? Who is this person? I don't know who it is, or, what his role is, so why should I listen to him? And to us, that was like one of the low-hanging fruits, actually, to determine, okay, we need to change something in our communication to make sure that the message gets through. Another element of the student journey map, and you will see so in a minute, is that it's a systematic approach, and also by involving like multiple departments, a multidisciplinary approach of working on improving the services for students. So it all starts with basically inviting everyone involved in this process. And if you could move to the next slide, Kirk, then I'll give an example of what a student journey map can look like. So what you see on the screen is basically the 5 rows with, on the top row, the touch points of a student. And I just put in an example here of a student enrolling in a university. So the first step is to make contact with the university, then register for the program, hand in the admission work, receive an admission letter, have the orientation day, and then there's first day at uni. And this is just an example. You can add as many touch points as you like. But the way it works is that based on these touch points, you start peeling off, okay, what's actually going on in this process? So what are the actions of the student? What is the interaction between the university and the student? So if you look at the first contact with the university, for instance, you could say, okay, we're using WhatsApp to do this. So The student uses WhatsApp, and then there is a chat going on between the university and the student in the third row. For the internal collaboration, so that's what we have to do as an organization internally to make sure that we can have this chat on the app, is that the different departments have to organize chat shifts, so someone is actually responding to the chat. And when it comes to the standardization, that's basically the row where you indicate, okay, how can we do this most efficiently, or what do we need to be able to do this? So for instance, having a corporate WhatsApp account. So the way the student journey map works, and this is also how you will work on the case later on, is that you will first fill out the touch points on the top row, and then you can either work horizontally, just going row by row, determining what the actions for the students are for each touch point, and the interaction with the university and the student, etc. Or you can work vertically when you say, okay, well, I really want to focus on handing in the admission paperwork, for instance, that you just go work vertically, saying, okay, what are the actions of the students? What's the interaction? What do we need to do internally? And what can be standardized? So there's different approaches how you can take it. But the end result is basically an overview of all the different steps and of all of the actions within the process. And what we'll do today is we'll map a process first, so you have insight in what the student is actually experiencing and what the organization needs to do. And based on that map, you can start improving the process. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself now, so a little bit more about that later. Before we will present you the case, I would like to ask you, are there any questions at this point? If not, then I think I'm going to hand over back to Kirk.
Thanks, Boudewijn. And as that quote says on the screen, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So we're hoping that you'll feel very involved today as we go through this next example. Now, when we asked the folks who joined us yesterday, what country were they most interested in? Where would they like to explore a student coming from? They told us India would be a case of most interest. So we've created a student for you. His name is Suraj, and he's coming to Germany from India to take a master's program in information technology, or at least that's what he's planning to do, and that's his ambition. So here's his journey to make this possible. These are the steps that he might go through. The first stage would be to gather information, select a course and a university that he would like to apply to. And how does he do that? What I'd like to know first is, where do international students gain information about your university? And you can use the Menti, if you've still got that open, to go back and answer this question. You could put down a few words just to tell us what your major sources of information might be. For a student in India looking for information about your university, would they go to your university website? Would they go to an education agent? Would they perhaps talk to their family, their friends, or others? Looks like we've got some responses. The DAAD, the International Office website specifically, rankings websites, maybe portals, definitely, expos, family and friends. Yeah, thank you for that. These are all important sources of information. And for someone like Suraj, he would certainly ask family and friends, particularly those who have an experience in Germany. He might have family or friends already living or studying in Germany. So that's a primary source of information, particularly if he has siblings, brothers or sisters who've already participated in international education. He might also search online, almost certainly. He will look online. He'll be looking at the government education websites like the DAAD. He'll be talking to education agents and visiting their websites. And again, almost certainly he'll be looking at the rankings of the universities, but also the profiles that are attached to those rankings websites. You see the next box in purple there? He's likely in India to attend an international education expo. There are expos all over South Asia, and they run throughout the year, but in peak periods when recruitment is most active. Universities are often represented by their own marketing staff, but more commonly they're represented by their education agents. So Suraj is likely to talk to someone who's a representative of your university rather than an employee of your university. He's likely then to visit an education office, an education agent office, and they could provide him with very detailed information about your programs, but also the pathways to your programs. Suraj might not be directly eligible for admission. He may need to take a preparatory program. They'll talk about various locations and institutions in Germany, and they'll walk him through the admission requirements. Particularly, how will his qualifications from India be recognized? Will he be eligible to enter a master's program? They'll explain language requirements to him, the costs of programs and scholarships that might be available, and then they'll explain visa requirements. The agent often plays a very important role in preparing a student's visa application so that it's successful. They might, very importantly, talk to him about career outcomes. What can he expect to gain from an experience studying in Germany? Is he likely to return to work in India? Perhaps he'll work elsewhere in Europe, or maybe settle for a career within Germany itself. And then the ultimate source of truth for most students like Suraj is the university website itself, where he can gain first-hand information about your courses, your requirements, the costs, and get a real sense of what your campus is like. All of this comes in the information gathering phase. The next stage is the application. So once Suraj has decided he wants a Master of Information Technology at your university, he needs to apply. Most students from India would apply either online or via an agent, or both. The agent may assist them with the online application process. For most universities, the student would then await the outcome. That might be as little as a few days or a couple of weeks, or it may be many months, particularly for a complex application like a research application that needs supervisor approval. So the patience is tested here as the student awaits an outcome. In many cases, the student will apply without meeting all requirements. So they may receive a conditional offer and then need to meet the conditions of that offer to gain a firm or formal offer. Language tests can be an outstanding requirement. They may need to provide certified documents or further information about the qualification they have from India. They may need also to provide evidence of funds for visa purposes. Then they come to the stage in the bottom right, you see, of accepting an offer. And with that, usually applying for a visa with the appropriate documentation from your university. Once they have that process, then there's a series of pre-departure tasks. They may seek to find accommodation before they leave. They'll find out information about your orientation program to ensure that they arrive on time. They may have preparatory language courses available to them, and they'll need to sort out and confirm their insurance and insurance policies and requirements before they depart. Once they've done all of those things, they will travel to Germany. And that begins stage 3, which we would call the in-country experience. This is upon entry to Germany. First stage is arrival and immigration. Assuming that he has the correct visa documentation, his process through immigration should be very straightforward. But there could also be challenges if he has not got all of the appropriate paperwork and documentation. He'll then need housing, either temporary or long-term. He might start with a temporary stay and move to longer-term accommodation once he understands the campus environment. He will attend your orientation and then within that, usually, confirm his enrollment details. Within that process, very often, he will be required to register and choose a timetable of classes. From there, he'll start. He'll commence studies with you. And then he has to meet the academic expectations of his program. That would generally require attendance, the completion of assessments. He may be involved in group work for the first time, which is not always a standard practice in Indian qualifications. And he'll be experiencing new standards of, for example, referencing. There are different plagiarism rules at German universities and European universities more generally than there are in India. Different standards and quality, so different expectations. He may need support with that and guidance, both from peers but also from academic advisors. The next stage in green is extracurricular experience. So to make Suraj successful, to ensure he has the best possible experience in Germany, he'll need some level of support. That could involve social programs. It might form other activities that support his integration, and he might rely on the official support services offered by your university. In many courses, he will also be involved in work-integrated learning. That might be an internship or a professional placement to satisfy his course requirements. And that's the end of stage 3. Stage 4 is where Suraj progresses through his course towards the eventual completion. And we'll go through those steps now. Academic progress is the all-important part. He needs to achieve passes in all of his required units, courses, or subjects. He needs to maintain his visa compliance throughout his degree, which means being aware of what the requirements are of that visa program. He needs to maintain adequate finances throughout his stay, and that could involve employment, part-time in official capacities, or in placement programs within his degree. He'll have to explore career opportunities, both during his studies, but for graduate employment. He may be a supporter of his family or community. He may have brought with him a child, a spouse, an extended family, or he may be supporting family back home. Either way, there's a relationship with his family. They may be supporting him, or he may be supporting them. He may need to travel outside of Germany during his stay, either within Europe, perhaps for leisure, or back to India in the vacation periods. Either way, he'll need to manage that and understand the implications for his student visa. Then when everything progresses well, he'll move towards course completion of all the requirements. If he does that, he's eligible for graduation. He would receive a transcript of results and testema to confirm that he's completed all of the requirements of that master's program. At that point, he'll decide whether he wants to commit to further study or whether he wants to return home, where he might have already organized a graduate employment opportunity. Beyond that, he could have options to work elsewhere within Europe, elsewhere in the world, or again, possibly within Germany. So the journey is long and it has many different parts to it, but you can see that there is a lot there to map. What this means is Suraj has a lot of different hurdles and challenges along the way. Importantly, the people at your university are often the ones most valuable to helping Suraj with these different elements. And again, we've got another question for you. Which people in your university are most important to people like Suraj in their journey? And again, you can choose a few options here. Don't feel compelled to put down one person. We know that there are many people who are important to international students, but just have a think about those you feel have the most impact on the student success. And we'll give you a few moments to do that. We can see that the international office is important. And maybe that's because some of us are from the international office. So we tend to think of ourselves as very important. We know how important the work is that we do. But other students is emerging there as well. This is a really important thing that I'm really pleased you've noticed. Peers have a really big impact on the success of other students. When students feel well supported, where they feel well informed, they're much more likely to succeed. And that's not necessarily other students from their own background. It could be local German students who are just acting as mentors and guides for these new international students. Study program coordinators, the departments, the support centers, and academic advisors. Student clubs is mentioned there as well, and student services. So thank you. Now, we'll be introducing the next exercise. So I'll hand back to you, Boudewijn.
We're going to put you in some breakout rooms with about 5 people, and we're going to ask you to map Suraj's current map. And first of all, you don't have to map everything that Kirk just mentioned, because that would be actually too much for the time you will get. But the thing we're going to ask you is, in the breakout room, discuss which stage or maybe 2 stages you would like to map. And then we'll determine the touch points that are on the top row. Next step is either work vertically, so you can just take one touch point and drill down all the way to the bottom via the actions by students, the interaction, the internal collaboration and standardization, or you can work horizontally and just map all the actions by the student first, etc., etc., and just see how far you will get along. I will show you where you will be going by sharing my screen. So in a moment I will share a link in the chat, and if you click on the link you will end up on this board. And I would like to ask you to go to the board with the name of your breakout room, and you can actually do so by just zooming in. So for instance, if you are in the subgroup India, then you can just zoom in here. You see the information on the left side that Kirk has provided, and you'll see the map here. And well, to give you a bit of a head start, we have put some touch points in already. But then again, this is just the first go, so you can adjust this. So if you feel like no, Suraj should be working on the housing before he's actually applying, then you can just move the post-its around. And also if you would like to add more post-its here on the left hand side, you can just click on this button and select the color and put the post-it in, and you can quite easily adjust the size and move it around. And if you double click, you can just type in it. So the nice thing about Miro is that you cannot break anything that cannot be unbroken. So please feel free to just try to get the hang of the tool first. And there are some people who have been working with this tool yesterday already, so hopefully they can help. And as soon as you've got the hang of the Miro tool, I would like to ask you to fill out the map as far as possible. And again, there's no right or wrong here, but it's all about mapping the process and getting a feeling of how this tool actually works and thinking from the perspective of the student. So I'm going to put the link in the chat now. So if you just click on it, then hopefully we see a lot of you appearing on the board.
And as Boudewijn said, we don't expect you to solve all of Suraj's problems or to create a solution for everything. We really see this as an opportunity for you to play with the journey map, to test it, to understand it, and to use it yourself.
I think it's time to push us all to the breakout rooms so you can actually see on which board you're going to be working today. I think if you look at the 4 different breakout rooms, what I like is that you all took very different approaches. Like the India and China group worked clearly horizontally and quite structured in a way, whereas in the Middle East they actually moved some of the touch points a little bit to the right, so they had more space to really dive into and drill into the gather information aspect. And that's also something which I would recommend when you're doing this kind of exercise. Try to put the post-its in the rows below in the same column as the touch point above, so it makes clear this is all about gathering information. So that's also something you can do later on when we start improving the student journey map. But I also liked the way the Africa group worked basically all over the board. So as you can see, that there's no right or wrong here, but just very different approaches of using this tool. So just just to say basically that you're using the tool quite well in my experience. Kirk, can I give the floor to you?
Sure. We'll come back to the Menti. Okay, so that was the current map. We had a look at what does Suraj's current journey look like. But we could see within that there were some areas that we would like to improve. And so we thought before we go back for another exercise, have a think about some of the things that stood out to you. Perhaps 1 or 2 words about what you would like to do to improve Suraj's student journey. So if you still have Menti open, try entering a few words there and submit them so that they appear on screen. So better university websites, offering student assistance, offering 24/7 hours support. The orientation phase should be improved. Information gathering needs improvement. The website again. Open information sessions. And gaining access to information easier is definitely something, a guideline to apply. So helping students understand the application process. Student testimonials is an important one there. So hearing from other students firsthand, giving clearer pathways, easier ways of communication. Yeah, great. So we're all trying to improve things for Suraj. Suraj is having a hard time. He's probably just finished his studies in India. He might be working full-time. He might have all sorts of commitments. And he is looking for the simplest way to find the information he needs. So all of those are very good elements of advice. Boudewijn, did you want to talk about the second part of the exercise?
Oh, of course. We're about to send you back into the breakout rooms, which will be the same rooms you were in before. But now we're going to adjust the assignment a little. And we would like to ask you to think about the ideal journey map. So you can just continue working on the map you've used before, but using a different type of post-its, like a different color, for instance, to show the improvements. And by now, you don't have to think about capacity, money, time. You can just think of, okay, well, ideally, how would this journey look like? So you can go as crazy as you want, but you can also keep it very practical. So if you had all the time in the world, how would you, design the journey for Suraj? First of all, my compliments for all the work you've done so far. Because when looking at the different student journey maps, there's a lot of inspiration there, a lot of work done, and what we'll do in the next 15 minutes is basically have a look at, if you have done such a session, so you've got all your colleagues together in a room or like a digital room like we're here now, you've mapped the process, you have identified some of the improvements. Then the big question is, what's next? And I know from experience, at least at Radboud University, we had this tendency to, first conduct another study and, write like this big strategic plan before we would start doing anything. And I think for some improvements, it indeed necessary to take a bit more time because you need more capacity from colleagues or you need some budget from the leadership. But also, I think when looking at the various improvements at the boards, there's also this low-hanging fruit. So, for instance, if you're talking about start improving the information on the website, making it more clear, or maybe add a timeline, or add like a frequently asked questions section, that's stuff that does not need much money or much time, and it's actually something you can start doing right away. And also, when you have identified these improvement points, I would recommend to also take them and discuss them with colleagues in different departments. At Radboud University, for instance, we basically decide, okay, well, we want to digitalize the entire process and we want to offer the students to upload all documentation in one digital environment. And when we were sitting with the colleagues of the international office, we were thinking, okay, well, this is going to be expensive because we will have to develop an online platform, etc., etc. But then I was talking to my colleagues in the IT department, and they were actually saying, well, actually, the student information system has this functionality already. So the university actually owns a tool that can provide this kind of service, but it just hasn't been activated yet. So by just taking these suggestions for improvement to other colleagues, asking, okay, well, we're thinking about doing this, can you help? That can actually be a way of implementing these improvements a lot easier than it may seem at first. But maybe Kirk, you can share some of the improvements you've made based on the student journey map, and also maybe enlighten us a little from the Australian experience with students from India.
Sure. So Indian students make up the second largest group in Australia after China. So about almost 15% of all international students in the Australian country are from India, somewhere in India. And more broadly, from South Asia. In total, about 23% of all international students in Australia are from South Asia, including Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So they're a very important group in the Australian higher education landscape. What that meant was there's a large volume of applications coming into our universities from India. And one of the things that we had developed 5 to 10 years ago was some standardized approaches to qualifications recognition. And I talked about this a little in one of the groups I was working with. So we started to say there are huge numbers of universities in India. How do we identify which ones are most likely to be students who will be eligible for admission? And with the Australian government, we identified a group of universities and different sections of universities that would have students that were ready for immediate admission. And that allowed us to put more energy into students who were right for those programs. What we were seeing prior to that was volumes of 500 or more applications where perhaps 50 of those students were qualified, but there was so much time being spent assessing the other 450 that the 50 qualified applicants were being lost. They were not being assessed in time. So developing some standardized qualification recognition tools, and in particular some strong partnerships in India, helped us work on credit transfer arrangements that were standardized. And it meant that the representative agents working with our universities could really effectively guide students onto where to apply, how likely they were to succeed or to be eligible for admission, and they could help filter students who just weren't right for the admission to those courses. It meant that the universities were then putting much more energy in the right places, and it reduced the turnaround times for applicants. It also meant that in the years to come, more qualified applicants applied and less qualified applicants did not. So it just improved more and more. The reputation of Australian universities improved because they were seen to be more responsive and their guidelines were clearer, and the agent networks that we worked with in India were much more inclined to steer applicants towards Australian universities where they felt they would be well handled and effectively and efficiently processed in terms of applications. So that was a long project, but it started with some small actions, which are which universities should we prioritize, which qualifications should we be looking at first, and which student cohorts or which student groups should we be putting most energy into. It was a very effective way of proceeding.
And well, this actually sounds a lot like a pretty big project to me that does take a lot of time. But do you also have like a more instant thing you could recommend that anyone in this room could do within the next month or maybe 2 months?
Sure. The peer programs were much more quickly set up. So we looked at who do we already have enrolled from India? Where are those students from? What courses are they enrolled in? And would they be interested in supporting other students from India? And they were really passionately happy to do so. So reaching out to our existing students and asking them to be our ambassadors was very effective. And we did something like that within weeks. So within one semester, we went from no student ambassador program to a really effective one where we had 20 students actively engaged with other students in India. We offered those students who are currently with us some benefits. They, for instance, received vouchers for our cafeterias or for our services. They received some additional provisions at the university. And that was a really strong incentive for them to become involved. But more importantly, they were just keen to help their fellow citizens, their fellows who were going through the same experiences as them. They really were passionate about wanting to help others in the same situation. I think you'll find the same is true at your student bodies as well. Sometimes it's just a matter of reaching out to them.
Exactly, and I think also for the larger projects, I've mentioned this app we created at Radboud University before, and that sounded like a very big project and also a very hard project to convince the leadership, because there was some investment needed. But as soon as I started calculating how much printing costs we had each year and how much the stamps would cost just to ship those flyers all over the world, actually that app basically earned itself back within 2 years. So for the leadership, that was quite a no-brainer, actually, like, yes, okay, this is and better services to all our internationals, and also it was quite cost effective. So sometimes it also helps to think about it, these improvements that way, like, okay, if you're digitalizing stuff, okay, are we saving a lot of time so staff members can actually put time into providing services to students and international staff members rather than just doing the administration, for instance. So just as a way, if you're looking at these ideas, try to keep in the back of your mind, of course, you want to make an impact for your students, but also try to put yourself on the chair of the leadership and how you can convince them. And that also helps in improving things and just start basically making those improvements. Well, once again, would like to thank you, and I think it's time to wrap up.
Thanks, Boudewijn. Yeah, thank you again from me. I'm really pleased to be joining you. It's a long way from Germany. I miss being in Germany. I haven't been there for 3 years now, so I'm hoping to get back next year. Fingers crossed.
So, and I have to say a big thank you to Kirk and Boudewijn. The whole workshop was really interesting, and I'm very pleased to work with you. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, and thank you to all of you, because you were really active and it was very interesting to see you working. Thank you very much for all that.